Hi, I'm Sophia, a 28-year-old new mother navigating the beautiful yet challenging world of motherhood. Those first days at home with my newborn son were a whirlwind of joy and exhaustion. Despite the happiness he brought into our lives, my physical recovery from childbirth was harder than I expected. The house was in constant disarray, with laundry piling up and dishes never seeming to make it out of the sink. One afternoon, as I was trying to soothe my crying son, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. It was Linda, my mother-in-law, who popped in unannounced. Her eyes scanned the cluttered living room before fixing on me, a mix of concern and disapproval evident in her expression. "I thought I'd come see how you're managing, dear," Linda said, stepping over a stray baby toy. "Tom mentioned you might need some help." "Thanks, Linda. Things are a bit hectic, but we're managing," I replied, trying to mask the stress in my voice. Linda walked into the kitchen, where the clatter of unwashed dishes echoed around us. "It looks like you need more than a little help," she remarked, her tone sharp. "This place is a mess. Is this how you plan to raise my grandson?" Her words stung, and I felt the weight of her judgment crush my already fragile spirits. "I'm doing the best I can," I said defensively, holding my son a little tighter. Linda sighed heavily. "Sophia, being a mother is about prioritizing, and right now, it seems like you're not prioritizing anything at all." I was about to respond when Tom walked in. Seeing the tension, he quickly tried to defuse the situation. "Mom, Sophia is doing an amazing job. It's been tough with the baby not sleeping well." But instead of backing down, Linda turned to Tom. "You need to help her understand what's at stake. It's not just about keeping the house clean. It's about responsibility. She's not living up to the family standards." Tom looked between me and his mother, torn. "Mom, please, let's not do this now. Sophia's recovering, and that's exactly when you need to instill discipline," Linda interrupted, her voice rising. "If she learns it now, she'll manage better in the future. You can't be soft on her." "Maybe you're right," Tom said reluctantly. "Maybe Sophia needs to learn the hard way." "Exactly," Linda nodded, pushing Tom gently but firmly toward me. "Show her that this behavior won't be tolerated." Before I could react, Tom's hand struck my cheek. The sound echoed through the room, a sharp and horrifying marker of the line that had been crossed. I held our son close, his cries mingling with the rapid beating of my heart. "Tom, what are you doing?" I managed to say through tears, the pain from the slap less than the ache of betrayal. "This is for your own good, Sophia. You need to learn," Tom said, his voice hollow, his eyes not meeting mine. The room fell silent, except for the soft whimpers of my son. Tom glanced at me apologetically, his face a mix of frustration and embarrassment. Linda stood firm, her expression unreadable, but her stance uncompromising. The visit had turned from a casual check-in into a harsh critique of my parenting and my worth. As Linda prepared to leave, she whispered something to Tom at the door. I couldn't hear it all, but the insinuating tone and Tom's troubled look told me it wasn't words of support. That night, as I rocked my son to sleep, I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that had settled over me. What was supposed to be a supportive family structure felt more like a tribunal, and I was on trial. As I tended to my son and my stinging cheek, the clarity of my next steps formed amidst the chaos. I needed a way out, not just for my safety, but for the well-being of my little boy. The house that once felt like a home now felt like a trap set by the very people who were supposed to love and protect us. I couldn't bear to sleep next to Tom after what he had done, so I retreated to the nursery with my baby in my arms. As I rocked my son back to sleep, the events of the day replayed in my mind, each replay sharpening the pain and deepening my resolve. The next morning, while Tom was at work and Linda was presumably at home, I made the call. Jessica answered on the second ring. "Jess, it's me. I need that help you offered," I said, my voice a mix of fear and determination. "Say no more, Sophia. I'll come by today with my truck. We can store your things at my place until you figure out where you want to go," Jessica responded, her voice firm and reassuring. The plan was simple, but it was risky. I packed as much as I could during the day, focusing on essentials for my son and me. Jessica would help me move everything in the evening, and we decided it was best to leave before Tom came home from work. I knew that if I faced him, he might sway me with apologies or worse. Linda's influence could take over again. As I packed, every baby outfit and toy felt heavy with memories and what-ifs. But the echo of Tom's slap and the look in Linda's eyes were all the reminders I needed. Staying was not an option. By late afternoon, most of our belongings were boxed up and hidden in the garage. Jessica arrived just as the sun began to set, her presence a beacon of hope in what had been one of the darkest days of my life. "Ready?" she asked, taking in the scene, our life reduced to boxes and bags. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, holding my son a little tighter. We worked quickly, loading the truck with the stealth and speed of a well-oiled machine. The nursery, my sanctuary, was the last room I cleared. I took a moment, standing there in silence, saying a quiet goodbye to the life I had once hoped to build with Tom. As we drove away from the house, I watched it disappear in the rearview mirror, a chapter closing with a heavy yet hopeful heart. My baby slept quietly in his seat, unaware of the change, but at last safe. This was the first night of our new life, one where fear and manipulation would no longer have a hold over us. Safe at Jessica's place, my resolve grew stronger. The peace and support I found there contrasted sharply with the oppressive atmosphere of my own home. It was here, in this newfound sanctuary, that I began to carefully plan my next steps. It wasn't enough to escape. I needed to ensure that Tom and Linda couldn't twist the narrative to their advantage or worse, do this to someone else. I started by reaching out to family and friends under the guise of catching up. During these conversations, I subtly recorded any mentions of Linda's behavior or Tom's unusual submission to her. Some were cautious, but many had no idea about the extent of the manipulation and control Linda exerted. Over the course of weeks, I gathered text messages, voicemails, and recorded calls. I even captured a particularly damning video of Linda coaching Tom on how to handle me, using language that made it clear this was about control, not concern. With everything in place, I chose the venue for the confrontation, a family gathering hosted by Tom's sister for her anniversary. It was a neutral setting, with enough family members present, some of whom had quietly voiced discomfort with Linda's dominance in the family dynamics. On the day of the gathering, my nerves were taut. I arrived with Jessica, who had agreed to be my support through this ordeal. The murmurs of greeting were strained, the tension from Tom and Linda's recent domestic issues palpable, even to the most distant relatives. After the initial pleasantries, I stood up, my hands trembling, but my voice steady. "I have something important to share with all of you today," I began, feeling every eye in the room lock onto me. "It's about Tom and his mother, Linda, and how their actions have not only impacted me and my son, but the entire family." Tom, looking shocked and a bit scared, tried to interrupt. "Sophia, let's not do this here," he said, his voice shaky. But I pressed on, pulling out my phone. "This is not just a domestic issue," I said, connecting my phone to the Bluetooth speaker. The room fell silent as the recordings began to play. Linda's harsh commands, Tom's quiet agreements, their planning to correct my behavior. The reactions in the room ranged from shock to disgust. Tom's aunt, who had always been kind to me, looked particularly betrayed. "Is this true, Linda? Were you forcing Tom to do these things?" Linda's face twisted in fury and panic. "These are just out of context." She tried to deflect, but Tom's cousin, a quiet observer until now, stood up. "No, they aren't. We've seen hints of this for years. We just didn't want to believe it." As the confrontation unfolded, relatives began sharing their own experiences, each adding another piece to the puzzle. Slowly, the portrait of a woman who had manipulated her family under the guise of matriarchal concern came into focus. Tom sat there, pale and silent, finally seeing the web his mother had woven around him. The family gathering turned into a heated debate about Linda's influence, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out, not just for me, but for everyone to see, but for everyone who had been touched by Linda's toxic manipulations. The evening ended with promises of change and support for me and my son, along with a clear message to Linda. Her control was no longer welcome after the storm of the family confrontation. A quiet, somber realization settled over everyone involved. Tom's family, so long under Linda's sway, now saw her manipulations for what they truly were. The collective shock was palpable, the discomfort undeniable, as they all came to terms with how deep Linda's influence had burrowed into their lives. For me, the decision to leave Tom was as painful as it was necessary. As the family gathering dispersed, the finality of my choice became real. I gathered my son, who remained blissfully unaware of the turmoil around him, and with one last glance at the family home, I stepped into the unknown. Tom watched us leave, a mixture of sorrow and resignation in his eyes. His voice, once so familiar, seemed like a distant echo as he whispered a weak goodbye. Linda, on the other hand, faced a harsher reality. The family she had once controlled so tightly now turned their backs on her, each member grappling with their own feelings of betrayal and misplaced trust. The blame for breaking the family apart was placed firmly on her shoulders. Her attempts to regain control fell on deaf ears. The evidence and collective testimonies at the gathering had been too damning to ignore. In the weeks that followed, Tom tried to reach out. His messages were a mix of apologies, pleas for understanding, and promises of change. But the memory of his hand raised against me, along with the echo of his mother's voice in his actions, formed a barrier too great to overcome. The trust was shattered, and with it, the foundation of our marriage. I found refuge in a small apartment, far from the neighborhood I once called home, a place where no one knew my story. Jessica remained my steadfast supporter, helping me navigate this new phase of life. My days became filled with simple routines, caring for my son and rebuilding a world safe from the shadows of the past. The healing process was slow and often painful. There were days when the weight of everything that had happened felt overwhelming, but the freedom to make choices without fear of manipulation or abuse was a powerful motivator. I began attending therapy and joined support groups for single mothers, slowly knitting the fragments of my old self back together into someone stronger, more resilient. My son's laughter became my anchor, and his milestones, a series of light points, guided me forward. As he grew, so did my confidence in our future, one I was now crafting on my own terms. Months turned into a year, and one evening, as I put my son to bed in our cozy living room, filled with drawings and toys, I reflected on the journey. The pain of the past still lingered like a shadow, but it was dwarfed by the light of new beginnings. The support of friends and the unconditional love of my son had woven a safety net strong enough to catch me on the days I faltered. Sitting down with a cup of tea, I felt ready to share my story with the world. I started a blog, a space to speak about my experiences, to connect with others who might be facing their own battles against manipulation and abuse. Each post was a step further from the victim I had once been and a step closer to the advocate I was becoming. As I conclude this story of resilience and courage, I want to ask all of you a question. Do you believe it's possible to fully break free from manipulative family dynamics, or do the shadows of such relationships linger in our lives forever? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story moved you and resonated with your own experiences, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps us bring more real-life stories like this to light. Thank you for watching, and let's keep the conversation going.